Economic freedom is the key to greater opportunity and an improved quality of life. It is the freedom to choose how to produce, sell, and use your own resources, while respecting others' rights to do the same. While a simple concept, economic freedom is an engine that drives prosperity in the world and is the difference between why some societies thrive while others do not. Lawson defined economic freedom as consisting of free market, private property, and personal choice, freedom to trade both within a country and foreign trade, freedom to enter markets, and security of property and the rule of law. He said that there is a role for government in this system to protect property rights and provide basic infrastructure, but the role of government is limited. James Lawson is a co-author of the Economic Freedom of the World Annual Report, with James Watney and Joshua Hall. This report provides an economic freedom index for over 140 countries. Lawson earned his bachelor's degree in economics from the Honors Tutorial College at Ohio University and his master's and PhD in economics from Florida State University. Measuring economic freedom is complex and multidimensional. Data comes from 141 countries using 42 components that are grounded into 5 broad areas: size of government, including expenditure, taxes, and enterprises, legal structure and security of property rights, access to sound money, freedom to trade internationally, and regulation of credit, labor, and business. Ratings are on a scale from 0 to 10, with 10 representing the most freedom.
Why are some places rich and others poor? Why are some big cities bright and others dark? These are some of the most important and enduring puzzles in the history of economics. Adam Smith saw these same contrasts in 1776 and asked the same questions in his book, The Wealth of Nations. For Smith, the source of these differences was simple: economic freedom. In his own words, little else is requisite to carry a state to the highest degree of opulence from the lowest barbarism, but peace, easy taxes, and a tolerable administration of justice. Was Smith right that a limited government that keeps the peace and administers justice is all we need for prosperity? How would we know? The Economic Freedom of the World Report measures how a country's policies are consistent with personal choice, private property, and voluntary exchange, the economic system that Adam Smith advocated. We can use these measures to rank a country's economic freedom and then see how freedom is related to growth. Let's take these rankings and separate the countries into 4 groups, from the least free to the most free. The countries with the lowest economic freedom have the lowest GDP per capita, but the freest countries enjoy a standard of living over 8 times higher. If you think that these results are skewed by factors like geography or culture, let's look at the Korean Peninsula. North and South Korea have similar culture, geography, and natural resources. Now let's look at the peninsula at night. What happened? In 1953, Korea separated. The South chose greater economic freedom, while the North eliminated nearly every form of individual liberty. 60 years later, average income in South Korea is 10 times higher than in the North. Now, let's look a little closer to home. Maryland versus West Virginia. According to the report, The Economic Freedom of North America, Maryland is the 18th freest state, while West Virginia is 40th. Why? The West Virginia tax code makes it difficult for businesses to operate. For example, the buildings you see in this photo on the Maryland side, those belong to a company that was originally founded in West Virginia. It moved across the border so its taxes and costs would be lower, allowing it to grow, create more jobs, and increase prosperity. This happens all over the state, and these differences in prosperity are measurable. The result is that per capita incomes are over $10,000 higher in Maryland than in West Virginia. Clearly, they should have followed Adam Smith's advice. He got it right. Individual freedom in economic life leads to economic progress. So if you care about growth and prosperity, you can't ignore the importance of economic freedom. Everyone wants to make the world a better place, but not everyone understands how economic freedom leads to well-being. The cornerstones of economic freedom are personal choice, voluntary exchange, the freedom to compete in markets, and private property rights. These freedoms comprise the core of what's measured in the Economic Freedom of the World Report, which provides further evidence of the positive relationship between economic freedom and economic growth. An easy way to see this positive relationship is by breaking up the countries of the world into 4 groups based on their economic freedom. In 2008, the 25% of countries with the least economic freedom had GDP per capita of just under $4,000. In contrast, the freest 25% of countries had GDP levels over $30,000 per person. What emerges from this figure is unmistakable. Freer countries have substantially higher incomes. But what does economic freedom have to offer those who don't directly value economic freedom, or the higher consumption levels that growth provides? What if, instead, you value living longer, or better health, or the well-being of the poor? Economic freedom is positively related to all of those things and more. For example, using the same 4 groups, let's look at the relationship between economic freedom and life expectancy. The average life expectancy at birth for those in the least free group is under 60 years. Compare that to the freest countries, where life expectancy at birth is almost 20 years higher. Think about it. That's almost an entire generation. So one of the differences between economically unfree and economically free countries is how much time average citizens get to spend with their grandparents. So that was the average person. But what about the poor, the bottom 10%? If we look at this relationship, we see that the poor get roughly the same share of income in unfree countries as in free countries. But remember, incomes are higher in more economically free countries. This means that if we look at the actual income level of the poorest 10%, we'll see that they have substantially higher incomes in more economically free countries. But it's more than just income. There's also a strong relationship between economic freedom and other good things, like happiness and life satisfaction. It gets better. The more economically free countries also have less of the bad stuff, from child labor to political corruption. So by expanding economic freedom, the freedom to make personal choices, start businesses, trade with others, and own property, we get less of the bad and more of the good. Even if you could care less about economic growth, there's abundant evidence that economic freedom gives people both the liberty and wealth to improve the quality of their lives.